Of all the financial titans and philanthropists of the 20th century, none are more complex or mysterious than George Soros. Like Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and the Rockefellers, he amassed billions through ruthless business decisions, only to turn around and give away most of his fortune to advance his own personal philosophy. He can move world financial markets simply by voicing an opinion, or destabilize a government by buying and selling its currency. He also pledged more aid last year to help people in Russia than the U.S. government did. But now George Soros is worried. He thinks the global economy is coming apart at the seams and that the world needs to be protected from people like George Soros.
We may now think that everything is fine, but the fact is that the system is broke and it needs fixing.
What you're doing is asking some form of regulation to protect the world against you.
Well, I am a player, and I think all players should be regulated. There have to be rules of the game.
Take 81,000 to buy 48,000. Buy him 69,000 YUM.
Right now, his Quantum Group hedge fund moves $14 billion of rich investors' money around the world every day, looking for profits and answering to no one. Soros makes huge bets on whole countries and economies. Last year, when he saw cracks in the Asia boom, he began selling the currency in Thailand. Traders in Hong Kong followed suit, triggering a financial crisis that plunged much of Asia into a depression.
In the last 2 years, you've been blamed for financial collapse of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, and Russia.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Are you that powerful?
No, I think there's a great misunderstanding.
The Prime Minister of Malaysia said that the region spent 40 years trying to build up its economy, and along comes a moron like Soros with a lot of money, and it's all over. He called you a criminal.
It's easier for him to blame an outside force than to admit that they were mismanaging their economy and their currency. The French finance minister talked about hanging speculators from lampposts.
Soros says the Asian currencies would have collapsed even if he hadn't been in the market. They were overvalued. He says people tend to follow his lead because he's been so successful.
I think that I've been blamed for everything. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
This man is a carnivore of the first order.
Jim Grant is the editor of Grant's Interest Rate Observer and one of Wall Street's most respected analysts. He never tires of watching Soros, in part because of the huge bets he's willing to place on his hunches.
He has always amazed the people he's worked with at his audacity and his willingness to back up his commitments with enormous sums of money. It causes the blood to drain from ordinary mortals' faces.
Like risking $2 billion in Russia. When the Russian market began falling apart in August, Soros was the country's single largest investor. He called the U.S. Treasury and asked Uncle Sam for $7 billion to prop up the ruble. When U.S. officials failed to intervene, Soros wrote a letter to the Financial Times of London saying he thought the Russian currency should be devalued by as much as 25%. A few words from Soros were enough to cause panic selling that fueled the crash.
What's it like to have a statement that you make have such serious, grievous consequences? I mean, you can, it looks to me like in a number of situations, you can take a position against a currency or make a statement, and the whole country falls apart.
Well, it's a tremendous sense of responsibility, actually. And it's also a humbling experience because I am actually trying to do the right thing, and sometimes what I do has an unintended negative consequence, as it did in Russia.
For both the Russian middle class and for Soros, who lost his $2 billion. Whatever his motivations, no one can accuse him of greed. He's backed away from the day-to-day operation of his businesses and is giving away his billions now with the same determination that he made them in places like Haiti, a country that has less money in the bank than he does. Last month, he brought the First Lady with him for a look at some of the projects his foundation is funding.
This is Mr. George Soros, and he's going to be helping the hospital.
This year, Soros plans to give away almost $500 million around the world. In Bosnia, when the water supply to Sarajevo was cut off at the height of the siege, it was Soros who wrote a check to jury-rig a pipeline through an abandoned highway tunnel.
$5 million up front can be more valuable than $50 million a year or two later.
Ambassador Richard Holbrooke brokered the peace in Bosnia.
At one point, after the Dayton peace agreements in Bosnia in 1995, for a considerable period of time, George had given more money to implement the peace agreements than the U.S. government had. He just could move that fast.
In Russia, he pledged $100 million to help scientists who might otherwise have sold their expertise to bidders like Iran or Iraq. In Eastern Europe, he's educated a new generation. And in Ukraine, he spent millions retraining the old Soviet military.
At the center of George Soros, there's an inherent contradiction. Which is, on one hand, you're the capitalist who does not care about the social consequences of his act, and on the other hand, you are a philanthropist who cares only about social consequences. How do you resolve the two?
Recognizing that as a competitor, I've got to compete to win. As a human being, I am concerned about the society in which I live.
Which George Soros am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral.
To understand the complexities and contradictions in his personality, you have to go back to the very beginning, to Budapest, where George Soros was born 68 years ago to parents who were wealthy, well-educated, and Jewish. When the Nazis occupied Budapest in 1944, George Soros' father was a successful lawyer. He lived on an island in the Danube and liked to commute to work in a rowboat. But knowing there were problems ahead for the Jews, he decided to split his family up. He bought them forged papers, and he bribed a government official to take 14-year-old George Soros in and swear that he was his Christian godson. But survival carried a heavy price tag. While hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were being shipped off to the death camps, George Soros accompanied his phony godfather on his appointed rounds, confiscating property from the Jews. These are pictures from 1944 of what happened to George Soros's friends and neighbors.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. And it was whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Are you religious?
No.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Soros told us he believes God was created by man, not the other way around, which may be why he thinks he can smooth out the world's imperfections. When we went with him to Ukraine, he was treated like a visiting head of state and was received by the president. Then he was received by the prime minister and finally the central bank.
20% in cash.
They even allowed him to look at the books and asked him for advice. Lots of people want George Soros' advice. Most recently, South African President Nelson Mandela.
Actually, President Mandela asked me, how could South Africa protect itself against speculators like you? And I told him, I wrote him a memo, trying to give him the best advice I could, how to reduce the exposure of South Africa to speculative attack.
That's the old stop me before I kill again approach, right?
Well,
you're telling this is what you can do to stop me.
Whether I or somebody else does whatever is happening in the markets, it really doesn't make any difference to the outcome. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt.
Part of the reason he is so rich is that the Soros hedge funds operate offshore in the Netherlands Antilles to avoid scrutiny by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So even while Soros tells Congress and the Treasury that hedge funds must be regulated to stop the global crisis, he's avoiding the rules.
Why is it that Americans can't invest in the quantum fund? It's an offshore fund. Why is that?
Because the fund is not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We are not
licensed to do business in the United States.
That's right.
Because?
Because we are not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Because we find it more convenient to operate without it.
So in some ways it's to escape regulation.
Yeah, that's right.
But you've been sitting here talking about the need for regulation.
Yes, and whatever regulations are imposed, we will obey. We already conform to everything.
If the beneficiaries of Soros's billions do not understand the intricacies of SEC rules and offshore hedge funds, they do understand what he's done for them. The president of Haiti is reading his new book, The Crisis of Global Capitalism, and so is President Clinton. Will all the attention spoil George Soros?
George Soros, in a way, is Donald Trump without the humility.
One of your money manager told us that George really does think he's a god.
I mean, if you think that you're God and you go into financial markets, you're bound to come out broke. So the fact that I'm not broke shows that I don't believe that I'm God.
15 things you didn't know about George Soros. Welcome to alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get informed. Hello Aluxers, and welcome to another original video presented by alux.com. He is one of the richest people in the world, an investor, a philanthropist, a business magnate, and author. He is an avid supporter of progressive and liberal causes in America and throughout the world, and a very controversial figure. Today we're talking about George Soros. George was born in Budapest, Hungary on August 12, 1930, into a non-observant Jewish family. After surviving the Nazi occupation of his homeland, he immigrated to London in 1947 and earned a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Philosophy. After college, he eventually got a job as a merchant banker, which started him on his path to incredible success. He moved to New York City in 1956 to continue his financial career. He started the Soros Fund Management Hedge Fund in 1970 and started to increase his wealth with profitable investments based on his knowledge of the markets and arguably questionable business tactics. He is a controversial figure because of the influence he is able to have thanks to his $25 billion net worth and his tendency to meddle in the economies and politics of countries around the world. No matter what you think of him personally or politically, there is no question that he is one of the most successful businessmen of our time. Now that we've gone over a little bit on the background, let's get into the 15 things you didn't know about George Soros. Number 1. He made over $1 billion in just one day. In 1992, the UK experienced an economic crisis when it was forced to withdraw the pound sterling from the European exchange rate mechanism when they were unable to keep the pound above its agreed lower limit. George anticipated this would happen and began stocking up on pound sterling that he was then able to trade for an immense profit. September 16, 1992 is known as Black Wednesday in the UK, with an estimated loss of £3.4 billion to the UK economy. Soros, however, earned a profit of over £1 billion on that day and became known as the man who broke the Bank of England. Number 2. He took on a new identity to survive the Nazi occupation of Hungary. Soros was only 13 years old when Nazis occupied his Hungarian homeland in March of 1944. He survived by pretending to be the Christian godson of Hungary's Minister of Agriculture, who secretly had a Jewish wife in hiding. His family purchased papers to say that they were Christians and hid in plain sight. During this time, George went by the name Sandor Kiss. Number 3. He got married for the third time at the age of 83. Soros was married to his first wife, Anneliese Wittschok, for 23 years before the couple got divorced in 1983. In the same year as his first divorce, he married Susan Weber, who was 25 years younger than him. They divorced in 2005. He has 3 children from his first marriage and 2 from his second. In 2013, he married Tamika Bolton, when he was 83 years old and she was just 42. The pair remain together today. Number 4. He was sued when his dog bit someone. George was sued when a black Labrador he bought for his son bit Brian McKean at Soros' estate in Westchester County, New York. His son paid a $250 fine for violating a local dog ordinance, and George had to agree to keep the dog named Naomi indoors, penned up or on a leash. That lawsuit was unsuccessful, but George is currently fighting a $10 billion lawsuit for allegedly meddling in the politics of the country of Guinea to prevent a fellow billionaire from securing a lucrative iron ore mining contract. Number 5. He owns a percentage of the English football team Manchester United. In 2012, Soros bought 3.1 million Class A shares of the popular soccer team Manchester United, which is consistently one of the highest-earning football clubs. This gave him a 1.9% ownership stake in the team. In 2007, the team was valued at £2.86 billion, or over $3.5 billion US, making it the most valuable football club in the world. Soros was able to buy his shares when the club made an initial public offering on the New York Stock Exchange, and at the current valuation, his investment is worth over $6.5 million. He also was a part of a group that unsuccessfully attempted to buy the Washington Nationals baseball team back in 2005. Number 6. His real name is Georgi Schwartz. In 1936, George's father decided to change the family's last name as a protective measure in the increasingly anti-Semitic environment in Hungary. His father chose the name Soros because it means designated successor and one who will soar. Number 7. He was awarded the Order of Freedom. In 2015, George became the first American to be awarded Ukraine's prestigious Order of Liberty. The honor is given to those who advance socioeconomic and political reforms while developing democracy. Arizona Senator John McCain was awarded the medal in 2016. Number 8. He became a United States citizen in 1961. After living and working in the United States for 5 years, George became a naturalized American citizen in December of 1961. However, he does maintain dual citizenship of the United States and Hungary. Number 9. He spent over $23 million to try to prevent George Bush from becoming president. Although George is well known for his involvement in politics now, he largely stayed out of the political arena until the 2004 election. George said at the time that his number one priority in life was making sure George W. Bush did not get a second term in office. He called it a life-or-death situation. He donated a total of $23,581,000 to 527 groups that opposed the Bush presidency. The donations appeared to be in vain, though, as George W. Bush defeated Democratic candidate John Kerry and began his second term in 2005. Number 10. He is the 29th richest person in the world as of 2017. George tied for number 29 on the Forbes list of the richest people in the world in 2017. The number of billionaires jumped 13%, from 1,810 to 2,043, from 2016 to 17, which was a record-breaking increase. Bill Gates remains the richest person in the world for the fourth year in a row, with $86 billion, up from his $75 billion net worth the previous year. It's no surprise that Gates tops the list, but if you want to find out some other interesting facts about this billionaire, check out our video, 15 Things You Didn't Know About Bill Gates, by clicking on the upper right-hand corner. Number 11. He's played a big part in the legalization of marijuana. George has stated that marijuana should be legalized because it's not as addictive as other drugs. Although he says that he does not personally smoke weed, he does seem to be very intent on the drug becoming legal. He donated $400,000 to help fund a successful ballot measure in Massachusetts that decriminalized the possession of small amounts of marijuana. He also donated $2.4 million toward the cause in California, where recreational marijuana use was legalized in 2016. Additionally, he has funded similar efforts in Alaska, Oregon, Colorado, Nevada, Maine, and Washington. Number 12. He bought an estate from Jurassic Park writer Michael Crichton. Bedford is a high-profile neighborhood in Katona, New York, that offers the rich and famous private estates in a quiet countryside setting that is still in close proximity to Manhattan. Soros purchased an estate from Jurassic Park writer Michael Crichton in 1993 for $21.5 million. The purchase included 63 acres of land and a 19-room mansion. Soros already owned the adjacent property, so he was just expanding his domain. Other notable homeowners in the area include Martha Stewart, Ralph Lauren, Donald Trump, and Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. Number 13. He is a convicted felon. In 2001, George was convicted of insider trading by a French appeals court. Soros was accused of buying and selling shares of a French bank in 1988, while knowing that the bank was a takeover target. An investigation resulted in no immediate charges, but the case was reopened a few years later and he was convicted in June of 2006. Soros made $3 million in the deal and was fined 2.2 million euros following the conviction, which was equivalent to his profits at the time. Number 14. George has millions of dollars invested in Netflix. As of 2017, Soros owns $32.8 million worth of shares in Netflix. He owns a total of 317,534 Netflix shares that he bought for around $13 million back in 2016. He also owns over $33 million in Amazon.com shares and about $10 million in shares of Alphabet Inc., which is the parent company of Google. Number 15. He plans to donate nearly all of his wealth to charity after his death. Soros has donated over $11 billion to charitable causes in his lifetime, and he doesn't plan on quitting after his death. He says he has plans on donating the vast majority of his wealth to charity, but that his wife and children will also be generously taken care of. Now that you've learned some interesting facts about George Soros, what do you think of how he uses his money? Let us know in the comments. And here's a bonus fact for you dedicated watchers who are still with us. George was sued by his ex-girlfriend Brazilian soap star Adriana Faria in 2011 for $50 million because she was upset that Soros had given his ex-wife a $2 million apartment he had promised her. But the case was dismissed because of her erratic courtroom behavior. Thank you for spending some time with us, A-Luxers. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpicked these videos, which we recommend you watch next. Thank you for being an A-Luxer, and we'll see you back tomorrow.